What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope all of you are well. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel if you will. You guys see the options on the screen. Patreon, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo. You can also extend a super chat. That would be welcome. You can go to Patreon and become a monthly supporter there. You can be a monthly supporter on YouTube for that matter. But you can also become one on Patreon, and you can support both the Onyx Report and the Institute for Black Male Studies. Okay? So I hope all is well for you guys. I had another show planned today, but I had a couple of conversations, and really this has been over the last couple of years, and I thought it'd be good to have a certain discussion just to lay down a framework for brothers who are going through a certain experience and don't have a language for it. You know, that's what we try to do on the Onyx Report, and what I try to do in general. We try to give a language to Black men's experiences, a language that we often don't have, you know, for things that we've never been able to really talk about publicly or sometimes make sense of. Now, I did bring this topic up a while back. This might have been 2 years ago, but BGS and I did a discussion about, you know, the mother goddess, you know, kind of idea. And we talked a little bit about the archetypes behind that with certain types of women. And mainly we did this because it was important to talk about how these relationships impact us. So that being said, hold on. I wanted to just kind of give a little more to that. Shout out to Tim. What's up? Shout out to Brother Damon. What's going on? We got no one in here. MLR. Good to see you. Doc. What's up, Adisa? Got Dr. Thunder. What's going on? Good to see you in here. Might have some brothers come up if you've had some experiences like what we're going to talk about. No one. What's going on? Appreciate that support. What's up, Peace God? Charles. 77 Base. Appreciate that support. Yeah. So, all right. So what ended up happening, and this is, again, this has happened several times. I've had everything from students, student mentees, Hakeem, appreciate that support, all the way to colleagues who've reached out to me and shared their experiences. And I've had my own as well. And this is over the course of the last 25 odd years. But we've started to run more consistently into a certain narrative, a certain type of woman that brings to the table a very certain set of experiences, certain set of beliefs, and what kind of problems can come about from that. Now, let me be clear. I'm not talking about anybody's religion. And for the most part, when I identify some of the traits and personalities that I've run across, or some of the brothers who are going to come up here and comment on it, it's not to say that all women who engage in certain spiritual practices, whether they be Christian, Islamic, Yoruba based, any of that. It's not to say that all women engaged in those are doing what we're talking about today. Not at all to suggest that. But there are some that engage in it in their own way. And sometimes that can be highly problematic as it comes, as it pertains to the everyday brother who has to deal with it. And we don't often understand where this comes from and why it's being put into place. But in this era, shout out to Greg for the Cash App, in this era of social media and this push for attention, this push to be lauded and sometimes downright worshipped, some of this has to be put into context. Electrician 480, appreciate the support. What's up, Queen Kalila? Good to see you. So yeah, you guys can see I named it Bitchcraft for a reason. You know, Black Mother Goddess Worship, Covens, and Bitchcraft. And it's mainly because there's a couple different aspects to this I want to bring out. So first to the conversation. So a good colleague of mine reached out to me and he shared some experiences. Adisa, appreciate that support. He shared some experiences about, somebody he knows, somebody he works with. And he started to identify certain traits, usually fairly withdrawn, especially as it relates to men, pretty exploitive in a particular way, manipulative, developing more and more of a misandric outlook as far as how men are concerned. And then it kind of delves into some other areas. And as we started to talk, I started to make connections with what other brothers have talked to me about. And of course, again, some of the things I've experienced at various points, and usually when you see this stuff develop, shout out to Douglas for the Cash App, it can start, innocently enough, tarot cards, readings of various types, and that in and of itself is not a problem. There are a lot of people that are engaged in that. That does not make you a problem just because you deal with it. But it can start to become psychologically and emotionally manipulative and exploitive, and that's where you want to watch the line, because there is a religious element to this, and there's a non-religious, and I'm going to give you kind of both. The religious element to this is you tend to find that you have those that use a particular religious practice as a cover. Again, it can come from any particular framework. It can be, Catholic based. It can be Protestant Christian based. It can be Islamic. It can be, Yoruba, whatever it may be. That's the cover, right? That's the cover. So if anybody runs across this person in public or whatever, they seemingly practice the well-accepted whatever tradition. But usually when you're dealing with people that are engaged in a manipulative type of approach to spirituality, what they ultimately end up doing is weaponizing it for their own advancement and their own purposes, especially as it relates to intimate partners, most particularly men, right? Now, just to be clear, a lot of these kind of people, again, in the social media age, are looking for adherents. They're looking for followers. They're looking for disciples. So you'll often see them selling resources, and ultimately selling an idea about being, a source of guidance for other people. And again, that's in and of itself is not necessarily bad in terms of people selling, certain types of things, but be mindful of how it's used. And if it has to do more with self-advancement than it actually has to do with helping people, then you're really dealing with something, or you may be. So that being said, the religious cover is one aspect of it. But here's one of the traits to look out for. This practice that I'm identifying, is closely tied to a very extreme kind of branch of feminism, right? So what you'll notice, starting with the religious cover I mentioned, is a manipulation of that cover, right? And a clear adherence to only the female elements of it. So if you're talking about Christianity, you might be dealing with Mary or other, females in the biblical tradition. If you're dealing with Islam, an over-identification with the feminine in that context, and the excuse being, of course, this legacy of patriarchy that all women are oppressed by. When you start hearing language like that, all women for all time, be mindful of what you're dealing with, right? And I've talked about this before in terms of Yoruba or Ifa. When you start to see people who claim to be practitioners, right? Whether it's, Candomblé, whether it's Santeria, whether it's Ifa itself, but they only identify with the female orishas. Pay attention, right? Pay attention. These are the small tells, right? The over-identification with the feminine, and that's closely tied, right? It's very closely tied to the diminishment, right, of the masculine, diminishment and or hatred of, and you can even hear it expressed in their rhetoric, right? Usually only tied to working with other girls, younger girls, women, so on and so forth. You'll see them over-identify with young girls and bring them into secret settings. And the conversation about men is usually problematic. Now, here's the thing. This is rampant at college campuses, just from my own experience. I don't have any data on it, so I will freely admit that. I have been to a multitude of campuses over the last 30 years, and I've seen this take place in a lot of different ways, most particularly from professors, sometimes administrators, sometimes from older students, right? This mixture of spirituality and feminism into a framework that valorizes and pedestalizes the feminine and downplays and diminishes the masculine, right? And it's usually tied to a hatred of the masculine, right? And over-identification of the feminine. These are some of the traits that we see most consistently. But the thing about it being on a college campus is important. As academics, as teachers, professors, our job is to help, in a non-formal way, to help formalize and transition younger folk into a more advanced stage of life, right? Help them find what they're interested in, help them develop an understanding of it, help them contribute to society in some kind of way. You can have people that will take that very idea and bastardize and exploit it to have disciples, right? Disciples that emulate who they are. And I've seen this happen at some campuses over decades. Emulate who they are, down to how they dress, how they walk, how they eat, what they talk about, their talking points, the phrases they use, and of course, this particular outlook that's wrapped in a spiritual blanket, but really is at its core misandry. and exploitive. I've seen this take place on many, and college campuses are ripe for this kind of thing, because if you're older and you're more established and you're dealing with impressionable minds who are really technically by law adults, right? So they don't have the same kind of parental supervision. You can kind of mold them and shape them in particular ways, because they come to you in many instances fairly vulnerable, looking for direction, and you have people that are willing to exploit that for their own purposes. Now, I mentioned in this conversation there was a couple things that he and myself and the brother talked about, and he shared some experiences, and I'm just going to share a couple of points that I made to him. I said, one of the things you're dealing with people like this is they're often energy vampires. They're looking for someone else's adoration of them to establish who they are, to establish their confidence, reinforce their confidence at that person's expense, right? This is one of the things you're looking at. You're seeing people who are looking for followers to address their own insecurities, but they're willing to exploit those people for their own purposes. And usually by the time people are involved in that, they don't see it, right? So you're looking at energy vampires who are really more concerned about their own ego than they are about the well-being of somebody. And this is one of the differences you can use to measure whether or not somebody's coming to the table with a degree of honesty. Is this about truth? Is this about helping someone, or is it really about them? You pay attention long enough and you'll see it. How honest they're willing to be, how willing they are to share, the aspects of themselves that don't make them look good. These kinds of things come into play. It's really a kind of spiritual pimping that tends to take place. But I want to clarify another thing. You do not have to be into metaphysical, stuff. You don't have to be into any type of spirituality to deal with or be one of these people. What I call bitchcraft doesn't necessarily have to limit itself to people who believe in metaphysics. It doesn't. So here's what I mean. If you have somebody, a woman in particular, fellas, who's pissed at you, let's say this is your ex-wife, right? She doesn't have to be involved in metaphysics to poison you. She doesn't have to be involved in that to drag you into family court over and over again simply because she's pissed at you. She doesn't, you know what I'm saying? When I talk about bitchcraft, it's not by any means limited to, something metaphysical. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to necessarily be dealing with someone that appears deeply entrenched in some kind of practice. It can simply be using the resources available to her to hurt you or exploit others for her own benefit. And when I talk about exploitation, I'm starting with it in a general sense, but I'm really talking about how it impacts men. And this tends to happen with women that you're dating, you're interested in, maybe even a longtime girlfriend, or maybe even a wife. You may have been married for a long period of time, and all of a sudden, your wife joins a study group or something of that nature, and then you start to notice the change. And next thing you know, you're in the midst of what I'm talking about, and you don't even know how you got there. Same thing can happen with a girlfriend. When it's a new woman, you may not fully know what she's into, but as you get to know her, you find that she may have already been into this, And even I remember, a couple of years ago, I was talking to Brother Jay from the hip hop group X Clan, and he made a joke that just stuck with me. He was talking about, sometimes he'll meet a woman and she'll be regular and normal, and then she'll look up who he is, and she'll look at his record and see all the stuff he's done, and all of a sudden, he said she starts wearing the Erykah Badu starter kit. And I tell you, I cried for 2 days laughing when he said that, because I didn't realize how often I'd seen it, but I didn't have a way to explain it. But the way he said that, the Erykah Badu starter kit, he talked about everything from the head wraps to the onks to, and see, here's the thing. So I don't want to criminalize, the presentation of African culture, spirituality, whatever, because that's not what he was saying. He was talking about the usage of it as a performative, manipulative kind of dynamic, where it's just something you put on, and as soon as a relationship don't work out, you take it off. Well, the same thing applies here when you start talking about bitchcraft. Sometimes you'll see somebody, some of these people engage in this. They'll have the presentation, they'll have the look, damn near will talk to you in old biblical language, talking about thou and thus. It's a trick. But the point of the focus in this is the capacity to manipulate or cause harm for one's own personal insecurities and reasons, right? The exploitation of others for their own advancement. And this is the key component that we're going to keep coming back to, because this is important and it plays into what you can experience. Again, whether it has to do with any kind of mystical dimension to it or not. Doesn't have to at all, right? It doesn't take anything like that to attack you in your sleep, or to manipulate your circumstance. I've known people who, if you so much as tell them that you're up for a job, they'll go so far as to call that job and tell them everything wrong about you just because they're mad at you. That's bitchcraft. Doesn't have to be religious based, but strangely enough, there is a dimension of it that is. So I'm gonna bring up two brothers who have some experience with this, and let them kind of chime in. So let me welcome both BGS IBMOR and Brother Sarah. How you brothers doing? Can you guys hear me?
What's up, Doc?
Hey, there he is. What's up, Sarah? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was on mute. I'm doing fantastic, brother.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so I put this on the table, and I know there are people looking at me like, Doc, this is this. Matter of fact, the brother I was talking to said, look, if I hadn't been going through this, I would say you're just pulling all of this out of your behind. But he said, but I've seen it. And he's like, I got to acknowledge that this stuff happens. And that's really all I'm saying, to be mindful of how people use whatever they can. Sometimes it's spirituality. Sometimes it's, other institutions for their own benefits.
Oh, yeah. It happens in the Christian church all the time.
Right.
And, the way you think the Christian church is full of women. Okay. Right. Using their power and influence, looking for a husband. The first thing she says, I'm looking for a godly man, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And she will perform, she do all the performance with the Bible and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's a performance.
Okay.
You see it all the time. Born again virgins, being celibate. I ran the streets. Now I've reformed. Same thing. Yeah.
Right. Sarah, go ahead and weigh in on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was I wanted to bring the contrast. I like what brother said in regards to the Christian church. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to bring forward the fact that many people have migrated away from the Christian church and gone into what they consider to be spirituality.
Right.
And in doing so, you see basically the same thing. It's maybe different in terms of structure, but it ends up being the same thing. And the thing about when people adopt the moniker of being spiritual, whether they choose a particular path or just couch it under the name of spirituality, much of it ends up being that they do so because there's no structure, there's no requirements, there's no accountability to be held to. Right. And that allows them to be able to pick and choose what spiritual principles that they want to adhere to, or to compel other people to adhere to. Not saying that they necessarily do it, or even know. But by couching it under the nebulous term of spirituality, puts them in a position to be able to better manipulate people. And so I see that happening all the time. I've had someone try to do that with me, as you well know.
Well, and I don't know what you're comfortable sharing, brother, but I do hope you share that one thing. So you tell me. Come on, man.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. So, sometimes you take them up on it. Sometimes most times you don't. But it happens all the time. If they take a liking to you, they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna come to you with in that stance. They're gonna put on that mask and.
Yeah, and one of the things I was saying this to the brother I was talking to. I said, and be mindful of the poly thing. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, usually at some point these chicks will come at you with the poly expectation, but it's not really about like free expression and sex. It's usually about them having a couple of husbands or boyfriends. And he fell out laughing. He said, man, it's like you know her. He was like, my boy, he was like, she just introduced that. And I said, yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
Although that's that a lot of the poly thing comes from the white feminists, and they're adopting, like one thing about, especially about Black women, they'll remix all this stuff, put it together, and and mold it into their own agenda. So they'll
Mhm.
take a bit from here, a bit from there, a bit from here, a bit from there. They push it all together and present it to you like it's a logical path of spirituality. Okay.
Right. Right.
Well, you
But
know
there,
what's
go ahead.
ironic about that is that most people, when they've thought of polygamy,
Hmm.
have thought of it in terms of it being a male dominating type of thing, where uh, it's the males who have a harem of wives or consorts or so forth, and so there's always then when it's put forth that way, it's attacked as if it's the most evil thing in the world.
Mm.
But
Mhm.
if they can shift it to being where the woman is the one who has the multiple consorts,
And it's okay.
then it's okay. And see,
Hmm.
that seems to be one of the paradoxes that is inherent in this push to feminism, because
Mhm.
instead of really being about women uh, emphasizing the power of the feminine
Mhm.
energy, that feminists instead actually end up being female men, and
Yeah, basically.
they end
Yeah.
up adopting the male quality. So there
Hmm.
is no femininity. And
The male qualities without the male responsibility, because in a polygamy, the husband has to pay for all the wives and all the children, right? When they
Mhm.
talk about a poly relationship, those women are not paying for those men.
that's
And
right.
I've been invited into one of those situations, and it was interesting the way they kind of framed it, because it was very much, all right, you pay all the bills
Hmm.
and you take care of me and my friend, and what we will do is we will occasionally have sex with you and we'll occasionally cook. And I was like,
Occasionally.
right, because you couldn't have it to where you determine when that happens. So
Hmm.
the way they framed, the way they saw, this kind of African-centered polygamy, it was, we the women get together and decide whether you're worthy of us, and
Hmm.
then you pay for all of us and take
Hmm.
care of our significant bills and take care of this and that, and
Hmm.
we will decide when to give you the things that we think you want, not necessarily what I want, because I
Hmm.
was never asked. They decided what they thought I would want and when they would give it. And so, but I couldn't decide when to pay their bills. That was,
Yeah.
it was a constant.
In other words, we're inviting you to be a servant to our an
Yes,
employee to our program.
absolutely, absolutely. And they would tell me things like, because this is where you start talking about, attracting what you're looking for. What's the term? Damn, it escapes me at the moment. Um, there's a whole movement in the church that really pushed off into this
The law of attraction.
law of attraction, but there was another term for it too.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
Manifesting. Yeah.
nah, but
No.
it'll come to me later. But
Okay.
name it and claim it. The faith.
well, you guys have the idea. It's just a particular term I've heard recently. I can't remember at the moment, but they were hitting me with that, and they were telling me that we've attracted you. And the funniest
Yes.
part about it was, I was never asked if I was attracted to them. It was
It's just,
assumed that
it's
I,
just assumed. Check.
Hmm.
simply because they decided that I should pay for their reality. But again, they framed it prosperity. Thank you.
Oh, prosperity. Okay.
Fitness, appreciate that. He knew where I was going with it.
Hmm.
They framed it in terms of prosperity. So you had this whole Afrocentric, African-centered poly movement, where where they switch it to where the women get together and they choose the men that serve them. And this
Hmm.
is the dynamic. And what you get out of it is a bit nebulous, but they can clearly outline what they get out of it. I wasn't with it at any point, but I have a tendency, and BGS laughs at me about this all the time.
Dr.
People in the
Johnson. Yeah.
sociologist mode,
Hmm.
people present some strange shit to me. There's a part of me that goes, tell me more.
That's right. Right.
I have no intentions of engaging this, but I can't help it. Please tell me more. And then I get off into, and they get more excited, and I'm like, I have no plans of engaging none of this bullshit, but I've got to hear this, right? So that's one of my weaknesses. I probably should
Yeah.
hang up on
It's,
this.
for research purposes.
You see that? See, absolutely.
Research
I
purposes. Huh?
can't deny it. I can't deny it. I got to hear more. But I wanted to also kind of explore this line of how this kind of thing happens whether it's engaged whether it's packaged in spirituality or not. Because one of my contentions is that it doesn't have to be. You know what I mean? So, like for example, when I talk about a coven, which is generally a collection of witches that work together, that does not have to be anything that's presented in a metaphysical context. Because as far as I'm concerned, in terms of feminism, most particularly with white women, for example, that's been a coven practice going back to, the first wave of it. That's been about highlighting and advancing white women at the expense of everybody, most particularly Black men, because many of those white women watched a Black man hang for her own pleasure and her own advancement. So, when I talk about coven, whether historically or in the contemporary moment, these things do not have to be steeped in spirituality for it to be a problem. And I want to be clear about that. I talk about, in the Black community, the gynopotestal family. I talk about the Black family that is comprised of a network of heads of household, most of whom are women, that operate in a female advancement narrative at the expense of young men, boys, and even adult men. I consider that, and one of the brothers said it during a show of mine. He said that's a coven. I said, well, yeah, you can frame it that way, but the point of it doesn't. And on one level, it doesn't even matter, because all you have to know is that these things can be used to exploit you if you're not careful. That's one of the points. That's one of the reasons I asked both of y'all to come up, because we all three of us have had conversations over time where we've identified this kind of thing. And I wanted people to hear from different brothers what kind of things to be mindful of, what kind of things to look out for. So I'm going to go to Sarah, and then I'm going to go to BGS. Tell us, Sarah, what are things that men should look out for when coming into contact with this kind of dynamic?
One, you should, listen to, what it is that, and try to discern what their motivation is for, whatever it is that they're suggesting to you. Pay attention to how often they use the words I and me, and pay attention to if they even express any kind of interest whatsoever in what you want and what you might get from this relationship. How often do they ask you any questions, right? So you want to discern what it is that what their expectations are and what their motivations are, because one of the things that is always a common theme is that people seek from someone to give them something that they need or want, rather than taking accountability. So for instance, they want someone to make them happy, to give them fulfillment, to feed their ego, to give them their wants, not recognizing that no one can bring that to you. That's a responsibility of every individual person to ensure their own happiness. That cannot be given outside. But so you want to look for things where you can tell that their motivation is to manipulate. Right? We talked about people who will use certain things like spirituality or religion and use it as a weapon, right? And so pay attention to when people are using those type of tools, for manipulation purposes. What do they, and I would like to say that it would be good for each individual to be somewhat familiar with the tenets of that, particular discipline, and so look it up to determine whether or not they're actually adhering to or discussing the tenets of that particular religion or spiritual path. Because what you end up finding is they just end up, if they know it at all, many of which is the case that they actually don't or don't really understand the tenets, Two, they'll just pick and choose what fits them, and what will basically further their objectives, and discard the things that the tenants that don't support what it is that they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I would say to really to look out for, is to whatever they're coming, whatever perspective they're coming to you from, familiarize yourself with that particular path so that you can be able to discern where they're coming from and what their actual level of knowledge and motivation is.
Right. BGS, same question. What should brothers look out for?
Yeah, you know what? It's like, you ever had somebody knock on your door and try to sell you something?
Right.
And they're trying to get you to buy into their program.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, right? They're probing, trying to figure out how to get you to buy into their program. That's come. They use the buzzwords, use keywords to kind of see exactly, are you a buyer for their program?
Yeah.
And sometimes, so the more interest you show, sometimes it can be that you understand what they're saying. Sometimes you can be an acolyte and you have no idea what they're talking about. But the thing is, they're trying to use buzzwords and keywords to actually figure out, are you going to buy? Are you willing to buy into my program?
Mm-hmm.
So every time I've been approached like that, it's almost like I've been, like a door-to-door salesman. Okay, I'm approached that way, and they're trying to get you to actually they're trying to describe the happiness that they feel and what they've done, and
Mm-hmm.
the program that they're on and that kind of stuff. So they're trying to bring you into their world, just like a door-to-door salesman actually would. So you're being sold a program.
Right. And one of the things I noticed with that,
Mm-hmm.
two things that come to mind when I think about that. One is trying to get you to buy into whatever their cosmology is, and if it's syncretic, meaning they engage multiple practices. The moment, going back to what Sarah said a moment ago, the moment you try to hold them accountable to whatever their tradition is, they hop to another tradition.
Right.
There's a fluidity that they maintain for themselves, but not for you. You know what I mean? They have fluidity, you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I noticed. The second thing I noticed is there's usually an emphasis on disciples. There's usually an emphasis on finding other disciples. And this is why I point out being mindful of who you're dealing with and what's going on. Because when you're dealing with someone who's looking for disciples and looking to make you one of them, that's a problem. I mean, and I had one even tell me straight out. She said, look, I want you to pay for my house, my kids, and I want you to let me quit my job so I can do what I feel like doing full time. Your money is our money, my money is my money.
That's pimping. Ooh, that's pimping. That's pimping.
The reason I end up in them situations is because, usually where you'd say, get the off my phone, I go, tell me more. Because I just got to hear this. but let me go. Sarah, go ahead and comment on this, man.
The other thing I think is important to look out for is what weapons that they use, and often what you'll find as an initial weapon will be sex.
Yes.
And that might be something that might be offered early on.
Yes.
To bring you in, and because of course, once you get caught up into that type of energy, then you're much more easily manipulated, and you lose sight of your senses.
Of course, you're thinking with the wrong head. Yes.
Yeah.
Thinking with the wrong head. So,
if you've ever been glamored with sex, Yep.
So be aware, because that'll be the first salvo thrown at you to get you to into a vulnerable position where you might, being out of your senses, may consider what they have to say, just in order to be able to continue to have the access to the sex.
So sex is a teaser, huh?
Sex will be the teaser.
Well, a teaser and an ongoing control mechanism.
Right.
Where that's used on a regular basis, as a way of keeping you as an adherent to what BGS identified earlier to her program.
Mm-hmm.
And it can even be used as a form of punishment if you haven't followed through. So I just want to put on the table how these things can be used, because one of the things I found in the last couple of years is there's a lot of brothers who are dealing with this on one level or another, and it presents itself as fairly innocent, but in some situations it can get really extreme, and brothers look up like, how the hell did I end up in this?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're married to her, you got a couple kids,
Mm-hmm.
and she's over here and explicitly even talking about casting spells on you. You'd be surprised. But even if she's not along that line, you still can have this type of manipulation take place. Any brother that's afraid that his wife is going to divorce him and take half his stuff, and if she's threatened to do so and knows full well what power she has, that's bitchcraft. It don't have to be spiritual in its presentation, and it can be, but it doesn't have to be. But either way, you need to be mindful of how it functions. And I will say another thing. One of the things I tend to notice with a lot of these women, they'll become life coaches. You know what I mean? They'll take these kind of positions where there's this amorphous kind of job that they have, but they get paid to tell folks what to do. And it's really, tied to this kind of thing as well. So be mindful of that. Whenever you run across these kinds of life coach, there's a number of other jobs in this area. And y'all can help me out if you can think of any at the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of telltales for this kind of thing as well. But
right, they'll call themselves, like you said, life coaches, spiritual advisors,
Mm-hmm.
or they may consider themselves a priestess of this or that.
I forgot. Oh shit! All right, see, Sarah is being real cool right now because he can tell stories about priestesses. I know you probably don't want to get his.
Yeah, half of them on Facebook, so you can find them really easily.
The priestesses are real. And somebody was pointing out earlier, we were talking about Jada Pinkett. They called her Jada Pinkett Shakur, but that's when BGS and I did the first show we did on the Mother Goddess worship, because
Mm-hmm.
it was the way that Jada Pinkett was talking about her relationship with August Alsina, and she was framing it around his healing.
Mm-hmm.
So her whole relationship, her whole entanglement, she framed around trying to help him heal.
Mm-hmm.
What you really saw, even in her conversation with her husband, was her willingness to exploit a vulnerable young man for her own purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at the core of what I'm talking about here, which is why I can say it can be spiritually inclined or have nothing to do with spirituality. It has to do with the exploitation of others, particularly men, for their own purposes.
Your emotional vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Really exploit emotional vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the door-to-door salesman trying to find out to exploit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. So I kind of want to put that on the table. Sarah, what else? I think I might have interrupted you. What else were you about to say?
No, actually, you didn't. I think you wanted me to share a little bit about the priestess experience, which
change the names.
See, I don't know. See, I get to catch Sarah late at night, and we have a conversation. He'd be like, "Look, man."
Ooh, yeah. There's a few. There's a few. That's like I'm had to get off of Facebook. There's a few.
Yeah, man.
Let me read this. I just came across this morning from this Swami who was on my friend's page, and he says, when a goddess worships her god, then she has attained a level of spiritual growth, and the same applies to a man worshiping his wife as a goddess. Okay, and the reason I read that was because what he's pointing out is that it goes both ways. There's a balance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to and you should, if you have a relationship, you should look at your woman and as a goddess and worship her, but then she should be doing the same thing to you. The problem that we have is that there is not that balance, and so then we will be approached with these type of people who will just seek it being a one-way worship, to where you're worshiping them, you're basically being a disciple, adherent, concubine, or what have you, right? Where there's absolutely no reciprocation, going down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just I'll go ahead and share the experience. So I don't know how this person found me. But she did, and I'm thinking, she's coming from, I think we had some mutual friends, and so she reaches out, and
did she have the Erykah Badu starter kit?
She had long graduated from the Erykah Badu School of Fashion.
Yes.
In fact, I think she she was probably a professor of it at that point in time. Okay, and so she would just start out by just some conversation here and there or whatever. But then after a while, she would like reach out to me, suggesting that we should meet. And then she mentioned during the course of the conversation, she would mention that she was in a relationship with this brother, and then so sometimes she would even seek me out for advice and counsel. Right. Not only but as she talked about the brother, her descriptions of him were like, the brother's a really good brother. He was spiritual and everything, treated her well and everything like that. And so I'm like, well, yeah, you should continue on and let that relationship develop. Then she goes on to tell me that well, the problem that she has with the brother is that he doesn't bring it sexually enough for her. And now I'm like, okay, sister, you're the spiritual person, right? And so you're telling me being a spiritual person that a deal breaker for you would be that you're not getting enough sexual satisfaction, right? I'm like, so I'm like, I'm thinking that to myself, how do you reconcile that, right? And so I'm like, well, I think you should continue to work with the brother, and because outside of that, you sounds like a good brother, and you sound like you have a good relationship. So the relationship shouldn't be based upon that, right? So she goes on later to invite me to go and meet her in a couple of different states, and I'm like, well, what would be the purpose of this meeting? Right. And so I mean, clearly it was, she wanted to be able to get together and have a physical encounter.
She was trying to dazzle you,
trying to make you trying to recruit you as a side dude. Yeah.
Glamour with sex. Go ahead.
Right. Now it did not even, fortunately, I guess for me, not me being a spiritual person, that wasn't enticing to me. Not this, that was, yeah. I'll just leave it there. That wasn't particularly enticing me. So she wasn't going to get me caught up in that, from a lust standpoint, to where she could use that as a tool to manipulate me. Okay, but clearly, for someone who had espoused, being a priestess, her behavior was not consistent with the spiritual philosophy that she espoused, and that's one of the things that I pointed out, because I know enough about the spiritual philosophy and path that she's on, to where I could be able to discern that. And so when I sensed that, and noticed that her behavior was inconsistent with what she teaches, that was like certainly a turn off for me. it did seem as though, she was like, wanting to have me join along with her, I guess be, someone that she has access to for, sex or whatever. Now later, it ended up being that, she was trying to get me into to join her spiritual program. So she would always send me these invitations to uh, join her program or join this I don't know, I think she called it online university or whatever. So, again, trying to recruit me into, basically subservience to her. And she would get upset with me, and accuse me of being, uh, misogynistic. I don't respect the, the female goddess. I don't, and which was quite ironic to me that she would accuse me of being, not giving honor and respect to women because my spiritual guru is a woman, and I'm like, sister, you should know better than to try to come at me like that. You should know my guru is a woman, so don't even go there with that, but that's part of the manipulation is to try to get men into feeling guilt over the patriarchy and so forth, and that we don't give honor and respect to the divine feminine and so forth.
Mixing in feminism with spirituality. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the kind that introduce you to their husband after about 6 months.
Yeah, that is true.
And try to make you the next one. But and I want to be mindful too. When I've heard this term, used way more often than I had growing up, where everybody's a priestess, everybody's a mother goddess. And the thing I notice about it, when you start paying attention, first of all, these titles, even if you're not in a particular spiritual practice, it's kind of like if you say I'm a black belt. Now, if I tell y'all I'm a black belt, your first question is going to be, all right, where'd you get it from? Yeah. What is the institution that you demonstrated prowess and mastery to get awarded this rank from? When you got people using these terms that can't point to anything outside of something they woke up and decided to call themselves, that's red flag number one. You know what I mean? That should be, But the other thing I noticed too is part of the lure and the manipulation is to try to get people to believe that they're in touch with something beyond, something you don't have contact with. They know the future, they know what's coming, and if they can buy your adherence with these kind of performances, that's another way of hustling disciples. And a lot of what they use to kind of stand in for this in touched, definitive, intuitive, divine kind of thing is usually a lot of random shit. It's a lot of random behavior that they, when they get into a mood or something hits them, and they present it as something beyond. And that's one of the ways you can measure if you bought into this person's system. If you fundamentally believe that what they're talking about is touched by the divine simply because they told you so, and they act out of character, those are the things to kind of be mindful of. But usually there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of randomness, and there's usually a lot of emotional and psychological exploitation. But more particular, they tend to have very little structure. There's very little order, very little consistency, and there's damn sure no accountability. What she says on one day, a year from now, ain't even something she remembered saying. And if you bring it up to check her behavior, she'll flip the script and tell you why it's different now. And again, there's nothing to hold on to, which is purposeful in this presentation. So, this whole question of how some people use these terms and so-called titles to manipulate you is very key. And a lot of it is driven by a misandric kind of feminist push to exploit men out of some desire to give a sort of revenge for patriarchy, which is particularly interesting because a lot of that comes at Black men. And we've talked about this on this channel and a number of others that I'm affiliated with. BGS has talked about this as well. We don't have a legacy of patriarchy. We're not tied in. Black men are not white men. We do not enjoy the benefits of the system. And yet, what you'll find, just like with Black feminists, and there's usually some overlap between these groups, Black feminists and
very much so,
work in what I call this bitchcraft, they'll use feminist rationale to justify hurting, harming, or exploiting men as a revenge, as a, as it's time for a reversal, as in this is due because of what men have done in general.
Mm-hmm.
It does not historically work when applied to the Black community, but it is something they push for nonetheless. And again, so those are the kind of the underlying drives that I want y'all to be aware of. When you hear that feminist language, when you hear those justifications being used, be mindful of where it comes from and push back.
Yeah, they'll use a sign language on you. Even here on YouTube, right? I had a Muslim woman, okay,
Yeah.
that approached me and told me I need to. Oh, what did they call that when you propose marriage? Okay, shahada.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I should,
this is-
she's a mother of three, a grandmother of two, and what I need to do is fly to where she is, and take shahada and marry her. Okay.
oh, she might have wanted you to convert, but go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, to convert to
Mhm.
Islam and marry
Mhm.
her so that
Right.
we could be married.
Yeah, and the point that you raised, Brother Hasan,
Mhm.
about the Black feminism, as you pointed out, there has never in the history of the Black community in this country or even beyond,
Mhm.
where there has been a need for feminism, because there's never been a time when Black men have oppressed Black women.
Mhm.
And so there's that false dichotomy that they're creating by saying that they're, men or women, Black women have to assert themselves and to, seek vengeance for the oppression, or even seek justice for the oppression of Black women, because it wasn't, that was the oppression of women was a thing that white women had for white men. That was never
Mhm.
something that was inherent in the Black community. In fact, it could be argued, as we've talked about, that it was actually the opposite, because
Mhm.
then, because of the social pressures that we've discussed a number of times, and the way even the economic system has worked, more often than not, it has been that our experience is that the it's been a matriarchal household as opposed to patriarchal.
Right.
And as we know, I think it was Sister Elaine Brown who was being interviewed, and the reporter tried to throw in this whole idea of feminism, and
Right. Right.
there was
Yeah.
an issue in the Black Panther Party.
Mhm.
She put that reporter in check. She said, "Where'd you get that from?"
Right. Right.
There was never any, patriarchy or oppression of Black women in the movement, you know.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
no one's ever really challenging them on that,
Yeah.
and that's part of the problem, and that's why it's so important, the work that you're doing, which, and I call you Black male advocate, because because you're bringing those things to light, and bringing up the discussion that hasn't been put forth, because of the fact that Black women have always had uh, the forum to be able to discuss it, and men haven't. So, that's,
Mhm.
it highlights the importance of the work that you're doing here.
Appreciate it. Go ahead, BGS. You were going to chime in.
I was going to say, in fact, I was just did a response to a intersectional feminist earlier today, right? And something that he says that Black men have never had the chance to define their masculinity for themselves. It's always
Right.
been by
Just
somebody else, including our women.
Exactly. Exactly. So I just want to be clear. If you're dealing with somebody, I don't care if it's a coworker, a colleague, or a
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend or a wife, and she gets deep into tarot card reading, divination, astrology, conjuring, that in and of itself, I'm not suggesting makes her what we're talking about. Because again, it can come from any other religious orientation or none at all. Right. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to be clear about that. But At the same time, if you see her using whatever it is she's using, any of the things I mentioned, or any religious order, or any political or historical rationale to justify why she can exploit you, she can take advantage of you, she can disrespect you, and you need to sit there in silence and take it because it's somehow right, or because she's been told by something beyond that this is how it needs to be, you might be dealing with bitchcraft.
Oh yeah, she's using esoteric sign language on you, shaming you, making you feel, insulting you, guilting you, and then so that she can feel right above you. So she's using esoteric sign language on you.
Absolutely. Now, what I want to do at this point, I want to allow one person up at a time, to kind of briefly either give their comment on this or share an experience, and and maybe the three of us can kind of comment on it. But I'm going to allow people to come up. So I'm going to tell you now, I'm not going to probably be able to get everybody. We might do this for about an hour. But please make sure you keep your language fairly PC, even though I done strayed from that a few times. As long as you keep it under wraps the best you can, we good.
It's part of it's in the title already, so
I had to go there. But but Sarah, go ahead. You wanted to chime in and say something on this.
Oh, it was just something that over the years, you and I have talked about this particular subject, as a matter of fact, and I pointed out how many people who will deem the moniker of spiritualist or spirituality, I'm spiritual, as I pointed out, that ends up being kind of a nebulous type of thing, and people's motivation for doing so is to be able to escape the accountability tenets that are inherent in every type of spiritual practice, right? So when you escape the so-called confines of religion, and I will say that there is a purpose of religion, and religion was not created to manipulate. It was co-opted to do that, but religion was meant to basically instill discipline.
Yes.
Okay? And so people will leave religion often because they don't want it to adhere to any type of disciplinary type of practice, right? And so there's a story that I related to Brother Hasan about this person who was seeking a guru, a spiritual master, and so they found the master, and the fat master, you gave them things that they were required to do. You need to go and spend 20 minutes in meditation. You need to do these practice and so forth. But that person didn't really want to do that, and so he went to find another master. And the master then gave him certain things that he was required to do. He didn't want to do that, and so he kept continuing his search for a guru, and then finally he came upon this horse, and he says, I want to know if you would be my guru. And the horse nods his head. So great, but before I start to adhere to the spiritual practices, I want to know if it's okay, if I just go out on a date. And the horse says, okay, cool. And would it be okay, if I also just go out to the club and and have a few drinks? He did nods, right? And I never really experimented with drugs. So is it okay if I just experiment a little bit with drugs? And the horse nods. And so he decides that he's going to go ahead and be a disciple of the horse guru, essentially because the horse guru lets him do whatever it is that he wants to do.
Yes.
Okay. And that's how it is with many people who claim to be spiritualists, you know, where they just basically make up certain things that are just consistent with what it is that they wanted to do anyway. And then they just characterize it or call it spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that they can be held accountable to.
Right. And we see this a lot with, you know, the mother goddess, priestess, you know, kind of people that wanted to get you. And ultimately, when you really look at the math of it, and sometimes it requires talking to one of your boys if she's highly manipulative, you find that when you look at the brass tacks, you're in a position where you have to sacrifice for her and she doesn't have to do anything.
Yes.
And sometimes if you're real deep in it, it takes a friend of yours to clarify that. And to any of you who found yourselves hated by a particular woman who is manipulating your boy, this is part of that dynamic too. One of the reasons she hates you is because you offer a dose of common sense to someone she's on the verge of manipulating. And every time he talks to you, he comes back with some clarity that she has to start over again to work with. So this is something I want you to be mindful of as well. Some people get caught up in these situations, and sex can be a serious part of the lure in those kind of scenarios where, you know, that's how that exploitation works. Now we got a few people in here. I'm first going to bring up G Money. G Money, can you hear us? Hello, you there? G Money.
G Money. Going once. Going twice.
All right.
Hello.
Out.
Oh, there he is.
Yo, I don't know what y'all be doing, man. What's up? Man? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. How you doing, Dr. Johnson, BGS, and the gentleman on the bottom right? I forgot your name. Shara, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is a very, very interesting topic. You know, I dropped a super chat in under a different name. This obsession with astrology and zodiac signs is another part of it. I just think it's just a whole BS in my opinion. And I completely agree with all of you guys. It's a form of manipulation, and it's very anti-intellectual as well. None of it is based in any sort of science or fact. You know, I don't know. I just think that this came about like in recent times.
No, it's been here a long time. It's become more popular as it's come, you know, with social media. And if you, me and Dr. Johnson were actually talking about the TV shows. Like with me, it was Bewitched, right, in the 60s, right, and then lately, remember the I think it was the TV show called Charmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that really exploded in the 90s about the occult and how women get power and control through the occult. So have a lot of more young people recruited into getting power over men by dipping into the occult. That's how they get their power. They don't have it physically, but they can actually have it through spirituality or some kind of divination or something otherworldly.
But I want to be.
Oh, go ahead. It all sounds insane to me. I don't.
Hold on.
I just think it's crazy.
Hold on. You know? So there's something I want to chime in on, but Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that we live in an era now where much of the old spiritual philosophies are being reintroduced and being revealed. We're in the cusp of the Aquarian age where truths are being revealed. Many of those things, those old philosophies and practices, have been repackaged and called, you know, New Age philosophy. So a lot of people have gotten caught up into those type of New Age philosophies. And, you know, a lot of it, you know, as it is when they fall into the hands of the West, you know, I'll use a euphemism called West for basically white people. They being left-brained will take pieces of it and separate it and usually will exploit it for either monetary gain or control, where it ends up, you know, seeming like it's separate, you know, from everything else. And so that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. and it ends up appearing to be something that is actually not being. But there is some validity to all those things. There's validity to, and if you go and do, really deep research into it, there's validity to all those things, but they end up, because of the way people exploit them and use them to manipulate and control people, they end up, getting basically a bad rap.
But here's
so it's sort of like what goes on in the Christian church in the Black community.
Yes,
Exactly.
and that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's not limited to these non-Christian practices. And the point I really wanted to emphasize is I've seen this shit happen where there was no spirituality invoked at all. I've seen it happen with just the application of feminism, right? Where you see these little covens forming on college campuses all around feminist discourse, and then you have this low-key kind of misandric element to it, because feminism and misandry never had to be hand in hand. That was a decision, right? You can advocate for women having, access to equal pay. You can advocate for women voting. You can advocate for all those things without a misandric element. You know what I mean? But the connection of those two things is very particular. And when you see these small groups of people following, whether it's a professor or a highly charismatic or influential older student, you can see those kind of things play out. So I don't want to limit this to religion by any means.
And on college campus, feminism has become a religion.
It is
in itself.
I do.
And whole ideology with its terminology, talking points, recruitment, acolytes, disciples, the whole structure.
Now, and I would argue that that's what led to the decline of men enrolling, because it's become a very unwelcome place for men. You could just be a man just going to class and you don't have any thoughts of oppressing women, but this idea that's constantly being shoved down your throat that you're oppressing women, and you haven't even done anything of that nature in your lifetime. Why it's unwelcoming. Like, you don't want to be around that sort of like rhetoric.
I hear you. That's true. That's true. Right. That's in particular, as you point out, when you go into the university type of environment where you're getting that, you're already getting it more often than not, at home, even as a child, because a lot of our communities are female head of household, and that rhetoric will already have been something that has been espoused by the mother, and so now you go into college and get that reinforced. G Money, your point is right on. You ain't trying to hear that there.
Yeah, I know. I'm not trying to hear that.
Right.
I'm gonna.
I mean, I've gone to undergrad, grad school, and you're always being blamed for something. And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't impress anyone. It's crazy.
I'm gonna bring you down, G Money. I appreciate you coming up. We got a lot of people in the queue, so
thank you guys.
All right. Let me go ahead and bring in AB.
Hey, what's going on, Dr. T?
What's up, AB?
Hey, BGS. I'm sorry, this man's name I can't think of.
Sarat.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead and you give us your thoughts on this.
Oh man, I think it's the irony of this godness part, particularly coming with Black women who are majority Christian, and I'm in the Christian church, and the Bible is very clear: no other gods before me.
Okay.
Don't make anything into me a graven image. Don't take my name in vain. And they run around acting like they're, and I'm like, okay, that's on you.
Okay.
And what the brother said before about, how I can see why guys are leaving college, because, like BGS said, this way of thinking has become a cult. And I can see that.
Right. No, it has.
You can see, and unfortunately, you can see that with the video you just posted, BGS. Good Lord.
We'll get to that.
Oh, I was like, okay. I'm not a PhD either, but I feel like my intelligence is being insulted right now.
Yeah, I call it not romper room, but Sesame Street for intersectional feminists. So
I'm like, come on, man. I'm a college dropout, but I'm still looking at him like, come on, dude. This is ridiculous.
it has become a cult, and the intermixing of these ideas, what you notice when, because the feminists got control of the school system in 1972. So you see the intermixing of these ideas along with religion. That's how come you get pastors on prosperity pastors on Sunday morning preaching basically feminist theory and
Now
mixing it with spirituality.
BGS, tell them the video.
Oh, the video was actually FD signifier actually explaining the manosphere.
That's a heck of a name.
Yeah, and
Right.
so I just titled it an intersectional feminist explains the manosphere.
Right. Okay. Any closing thoughts, AB? Anything else you want to add on this before we got to move on to the next person?
No, it is what it is, and we got to work through it.
Yeah, real talk.
Yeah, and something I never thought I would see, and Sarah probably could chime in on this. I never thought I would see intersectional feminists start to creep into what we call the conscious community, and you start to see it more and more and more.
Is he even going there too? Damn.
Yeah. I thought, when I was coming up, and this is probably 30 years ago when I actually got into it, because Sarah probably knows me. That you would see elements of sisters being, the gynarchy everywhere. So you see elements of that, but I never thought I would see feminism creep into it. I'm starting to see it more and more.
Yeah. You had a stronger womanist element especially in the early 90s and the 80s,
right?
In the conscious community, and then I saw the shift. I saw it switch.
Yes.
Oh yeah. But all right, AB, appreciate you coming up, man.
Sure, no problem.
Let me see. We got Brother Al. Brother Al, can you hear us? I'm sorry. I went to Sirius. I'm sorry. Sirius X. Can you hear us?
Hey, what's going on, brothers?
Hey, what's up, Brother Al? I'll bring you in next. I must have hit the wrong button, but go ahead, man. Chime in on this.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say a lot of the stuff that I've been watching for probably the past 10 years comes from a lot of videos that are more on the occult side. Now, a lot of brothers don't really delve into that side of the game because it's not really, it's more like we deal with more Pan-Africanism and like the more logical side of things. So what they believe in, I'm talking about what women believe in, is like the feminine aspect. And we all have to remember that these are just polarities. It's like a battery. There's like positive and negative. So basically, a lot of women get the juice and the means to be more emboldened about their endeavors, I guess, or from videos like Bobby Hemmett. I don't know if you've ever watched any of his videos, but there's a lot of good information in there. You can get a lot of good books, but one of the critiques that I have of that type of information is he is a very charismatic individual, and it borderlines on pandering to like your audience. Much like a comedian is just kind of play the room. He's playing to like the effect of women, because if you look in the videos, it's majority women, and like not to harp on the guy, but you're coming from the South where it's about Southern hospitality, and that's more of a matriarchal kind of dynamic. We're down there. So when you're disseminating that typical or that type of information, you're kind of pulling on the heartstrings of your audience. And a lot of these women in the 90s took that, ran with it, and used it to attack men. And it ran kind of tandem with a movie called The Craft. I think it was like released in like the 90s.
Craft, along with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Charmed and a few others.
There's been quite a
few.
Right.
I want to just kind of jump in on what Brother Sirius X is saying, is that what you're talking about is metaphysics when you're referring to Brother Bobby Hemmett or somebody like Phil Valentine. Okay, and so again, all these are based upon spiritual truths. The problem is that you will have people who will basically cherry pick what they want to emphasize, right? Okay, and so obviously in the realm of spirituality, you have both the male and female principle, not person, principle. Okay, those are energies. Okay, and so, but there are both of those things, and so where you have with these feminists will jump in, they will just focus on just the female aspect of it and ignore the balancing perspective of the male. Okay, not saying that it is what they're saying is wrong by talking about the female principle, but it takes it out of context when they don't include the aspect of the male, and so you take it basically it's out of balance, and so that's what you end up having, where just basically just people make up their own
cosmology,
your philosophy by just picking and choosing from certain different spiritual tenets.
Right.
And I believe personally that it was easy for outside influences counter to like Black men's influence were able to get in there, because the only type of access that upper echelon Black women would have for the past 20 years to that type of metaphysical information outside those videos was at Barnes and Noble, and typically a Barnes and Noble would not be found, or a Borders wouldn't be found in the hood. It would be found in like the white suburban areas right next to the Starbucks. So those conversations would intersect with each other, and then they would be kind of pulled by the coattails by the LGBT community and other interests that are trying to prey on the narrative of Black women being just abused and just psychologically fragmented in that area.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming up, man. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
All right, bro. Let's bring in Brother Al. Brother Al, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead and chime in on this, man.
Please, absolutely. Thank you so much. What the brother Sirius and what brother Sarah was saying is spot on. I felt like the brother was just kind of like doing a recap of everything that I've seen from 2002 on up into now, because I used to have a lot of those Western occult tapes, the metaphysical tapes, when it was all in VHS and all of that, going to Barnes and Noble, snatching up all of this stuff, doing like a lot of studying and reading, and but still having my wits about me enough to know when I see BS when I spot it, So this has definitely been something I've been paying attention to for a long time, and it prompted me to, and just based on personal things that I've seen in my own life, it prompted me to look at a actual kind of like do my own little homework. And so I came across two books that I think are written both by white females. One is called The American Feminism and the Birth of New Age Spirituality. Excuse me, they doing fireworks out here. Let me go inside. Searching for
all that is.
Yeah, that's all that is.
That's what I was gonna say, man. Where you are? You trained? Are you in the training right now?
No.
Damn, they shooting at the brother.
Like you ain't about to get real. Like,
I appreciate the support, but my show ain't that important, play.
I know, right? Look, I ain't even gotten to the dag. I just started, and here it is. They bucking shots at me, like yo. But it's the I guess the subtitle or the subheading is searching for the higher self, 1875 to 1915. So the author did I guess some research about that particular time, the late 1800s to the early 1900s. So when BGS said that this thing is old, he's absolutely correct, and it says it in the summary. It says, contrary to popular thought, New Age spirituality did not suddenly appear in the American life in the 1970s and 80s. In American Feminism and the Birth of the New Age Spirituality, Catherine Tumber, that's the author, demonstrates that the New Age movement first flourished more than a century ago during the Gilded Age under the mantle of quote-unquote New Thought, based largely on research in popular journals self-help manuals, newspapers accounts, and archival collections, American Feminism and the Birth of New Age Spirituality explores the contours of the New Thought movement through the lives of well-known figures such as Mary Baker Eddy, Madam Helena Blavatsky, which is a really, really, exactly. And that's what a lot of people like Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, a lot of these people who deal with the Western occultism and kind of weave it into what we call the quote unquote conscious community, get their talking points from stuff like this. It's all kind of like coming out of Germany and Europe. So you know that there's a connection there.
Germany and France, yeah.
There you go. And it says the Edward Bellamy, as well as through more obscure but more representative new thoughts such as Abby, so on and so forth. She goes through a number of names, and then it says Tumber examines the historical conditions that gave rise to new thought. She pays close attention to the ways in which feminism became grafted with varying degrees of success to emergent forms of liberal culture in the late 19th century, progressive politics, the social gospel, humanist, psychotherapy, bohemian subculture, and mass market journalism. American Feminism and the Birth of New Age Spirituality questions the value of the New Age movement then and now to the pursuit of the women's right and democratic renewal.
And that's always been there. They used to, they used to repress that, man, during the Dark Ages. So women actually proposing that and espousing it. Guess what happened to them? Guess those were the witches. They didn't allow that. So
right.
Under the new social contract, that kind of went away. So it was allowed to flourish again. Go ahead.
Right. Now I'm gonna say this last part, and I'm gonna keep moving because I know time is short. But the thing is as I look at this, and it makes me think about the whole concept of spirituality versus religion, I have concluded that even that has become a thing to bring a certain kind of disharmony. From my own research, I've come to find, and just my own reasoning, I've come to find that spirituality and religion actually work more together than they do separate when you actually break down the essence of what what both words mean. And I also found that I would always hear people say religion is binding, religion is contractual, religion is very constricting, and that spirituality, on the other hand, is very liberating. And then they would say that religion is patriarchal, and then they would say that Africa didn't have religion; it had spirituality. And so what they'll conclude is that because Africa didn't have religion, it has spirituality, and spirituality is feminine. That means that all things African must be feminine. So what the women do is a lot of times they'll leave the church to try to get into something African centered. But when they realize if you really try to go into the real, like if you go into Nigeria or Ghana or anywhere where a solid system, a complete system with the culture, the language, the mores, the ethics, the values, the clothing, the food, et cetera, and you'll find out that you probably would have did better off at church, because you can get away with a lot more at church than you can with these folks over here trying to be African. So you ain't getting away with nothing trying to go over to our stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so what they'll do is they find themselves caught in between, where it's this thing of I'm not religion, I'm spiritual, but I'm not that spiritual. I'm not like spiritual, religious, cultural, grabbing onto my ancestors' language and the values and the ethics. I kind of want to play in between and maneuver within that until somebody like myself catches you on it and calls you on it.
The other part of that,
the remix,
But the other part of that is you can't, if you go into these other traditions, you can't bring that feminism and downplay the masculine aspect of the tradition. They won't let you do that.
That's right.
And that's one of the reasons you see a lot of these people we're talking about off in their own little circles, setting up their own little covens, because you can't get away with that in a larger system.
There you go.
But
absolutely.
I think I interrupted you, and then we'll transition to the next. But go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I wanted to say that was what I was referring to, was in terms of picking and choosing the different spiritual tenets that they want to adhere to, and then discarding the other ones. Okay, and then I made the point that the New Age philosophy, which a lot of them are gravitating to, is basically repackaged old philosophy that comes from Africa. There
you go. Yep.
Right? Okay, and so, but they're just picking and choosing the tenets. And but as Brother Al pointed out, all of the same, requirements and even more, because religion and so-called, spirituality, they're extensions of each other. And when I pointed out earlier that religion is the initial stage, that's like the initiatory stage of spirituality, where you're given certain disciplines to adhere to. And so
Yes.
when people escape so-called religion, is because they believe that they're escaping those requirements. But if you see, and this is where you have to take them to task about how well they actually know that the spiritual path that they claim to be on. Because if you know about it, as you pointed out, they have exactly the same and even more stringent requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And I've studied at the I started my study at the Aquarian Spiritual Center, and we studied all the different spiritual philosophies, and all of them have those requirements that you have to adhere to for discipline. Okay.
Yeah.
There's
no discipleship without discipline.
But right, there's no discipleship without discipline, not at all. And and even in all the initiatory systems, like in the Dogon system, the Dagara system, Ifa, and so forth, as you go through the initiation period, there are disciplines that you must adhere to. Okay, and so this whole
absolutely
about leaving the church and going to spirituality is just a cover for people not holding themselves accountable to anything, to where if they misstep, you can't
call them on it.
You can't call them on it. Exactly. So that's why it's important to really just be able to act with some discernment. And one thing I want to say, just in terms of being able to make a decision with people. Okay. Always listen to your intuition. Okay. You don't really have to know a whole lot. Just listen to your intuition. Okay. Because you will get a feeling about someone when you meet them. Okay. You will know. Your intuition will let you know if this is a person that you should associate with or not. Okay. Now, you will also get another voice that will try to convince you to override that sense of knowing that's within you, right? And so there might be some things like we talked about. There might be the sexual attraction, the lust, or other things that you will try to talk yourself into associating with that person, because there's something you might get from it, even though your intuition is telling you, leave them alone. Okay. And so being with the intuition, and I know that from experience, because I know I've gotten myself into bad situations, and I know why. And
that's all us.
Right. But my intuition was putting the red flag up there and telling me, but
now we got a few people lined up, so I want to get some other folks in. So Brother Al, I appreciate you dropping in on this, man. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for your time.
All right, brother. Let's get we got G Serotonin. G, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. How the brothers doing today?
Good.
How you doing, BGS? How you doing, Sarah?
What's up, G?
Good, brother.
Oh, no, just chilling, relaxing.
Okay. Go ahead and chime in on this, man. What are your thoughts?
I've witnessed this up close and personal with my own mother, because my mother, she used to actually read the feminist books, the bell hooks books and stuff, and it shocked me because my mother told me to my face that I don't like men. You just my son. Wow. You know what I mean? And a lot of us, I was born in '89. A lot of our generation grew up with these mothers like that. And behind the mothers, there was a group of men enforcing the bullshit. Like when something would happen to us, we would go to the men and they would tell us, "Oh, that's your mama. Don't say nothing about her. You supposed to do this and you supposed to do that."
Okay.
And this and that.
Right. Yeah. I hear you.
And that's, I actually, when I heard the first time I ever heard that black woman is God situation was from a dude. I didn't even hear it from a woman. It was my father. He was an El Rook, and I grew up like Orthodox Islam, praying 5 times a day, you know, doing Ramadan, doing all of that. It wasn't until I left that and tried to search for like my black identity, I became a 5%er. That's when I ran into all the woman lead man nonsense. And it's like, as soon as I went over to try to go to the black African side, there was a whole group of men talking about, yeah, follow the woman. Your mama always right. Do this and do that. And our mothers was abusing us.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
So everything I learned that was like every gynocratic practice I learned to do with women came from an older man telling me that's how you're supposed to do women.
Right. And a lot of times you'll see that the source of this, you know, when you dig deep enough, it usually comes down to profit, because a lot of these industries really rely on that dollar. 70 to 80% of consumer good decisions are made by women. That's out of Forbes. So when you really get down to it, a lot of that is about, especially on YouTube, when you hear these cats on YouTube and you look at their subscriber counts and you look at who they're catering to, but that's also in the academy. You know, most particularly in black circles in the academy, there's a lot of gynocentric focus, because that's where the profit is. That's where the resources are. You know, so it usually falls in line with that. But go ahead, BGS. Go ahead. You're gonna drop in on that.
No. You know, this is got to remember, the gynocracy is a system, just like patriarchy is a system, right? And just like white women, believe it or not, even white feminists protect the patriarchy, or what's left of the patriarchal system. Black men protect the gynocracy the same way, because I've heard grandfathers would prefer to send their granddaughter to college versus their grandson. So it's not a new thing. This has been whereas a black boy should drop out of school in 5th or 6th grade to actually make money, so they can actually send the girl to college or to high school. So this is not new. So has been indoctrinated into not only the women, but also the men. It couldn't work without the men. Gynocracy couldn't exist without the men.
What's important to realize is what Brother G had said, was that, and this is something I alluded to earlier, was that many of us have grown up in female-led households. Okay. Yeah. And more often than not, their perception of their experience with their husband or children's father has been, you know, they feel victimized, or, you know, they feel, you know, some bitterness and so forth. Whether or not that was the actual case, that was their interpretation of it. Or maybe they, you know, made some bad choices. And so some of those things ended up leaving them embittered, which ended up being something that came out in their dialogue as they're raising their children. You know, so a lot of black men have grown up with men, or with their mothers telling them that black men are no good. They're talking, you know, negative things about their
father, about the father, while he's at work.
And that's the thing, Sarah.
You're just like them. You're just like him. Go ahead.
Yeah, we got told that me and all my friends, we were all homeless as teenagers. Our mothers kicked us out once we got bigger than them. All of us. It wasn't. I can't think of not too many of us that wasn't on the streets at 16, 17.
Yeah. You know what? Because this is something I ran into when talking to mothers that have small sons, right? And the first thing they said when they're getting picked on in school, they said, "Why don't you put them in some kind of self-defense?" And they never do, because women are actually afraid of their male sons, right? They're afraid of their sons, because if they can't psychologically dominate them, they try to physically dominate them. Most women do. They try to physically dominate the smaller child. So when a kid grows up, they can't do that anymore. They never establish any kind of other kind of rapport. So that's how they refuse. That's how most black kids are not into self-defense or using a handgun, anything like that, because the mother wants physical control over that kid, over that son.
Right. And I can say just from personal experience, my nephew grew up around my mother and my sister, both of whom had a negative perception of men based upon their experiences with men. Okay, and so all he heard was negative dialogue about men, about his father, uh, my father, and so on. And so, he's looking at himself, well, I'm a black man, and so he ended up, now, mind you, I was with him in his early stages, and he was attracted to women. But because he continuously heard that type of negative dialogue about black men, he's gay now. That's the type of effect. So when you start seeing people growing up, they basically like just parroting what they've heard growing up, and so that also, in addition to the profit motivation that Brother Hasan pointed out, it's also they've been programmed that way growing up.
Yep.
I'll end it with this, Dr. T. And the issues with it is we struggle now to have relationships with older brothers. A lot of us my age, a lot of us from the crack era that was born from 84 to 92, we struggle with the older brothers because when we went to them for help, they enforced the bullshit. So we was like, dang, why are we getting abused? We getting kicked out, we getting hurt, we going into the system, having a fighting off molesters, all this shit. And the group home system, and they telling us, man, that's your mama. You wrong if you say this. And we still struggle with that concept. But I'm gonna leave it at that.
Well, I'll add this to it too. You had a pretty quick generational shift happen in the Black community.
Yeah, true.
Between the 70s and the 90s, and the shit happened fast.
It did.
The expectations on fatherhood were dramatically switched. All of that changed. So when you have cats that came up in an era where you could actually reference a 2-parent household, respect for the mother makes sense. But a lot of older dudes, they saw the shift, but they really didn't understand the breadth of it. So we grew up, I was born in 74, but I still was raised in that generation that were raised by single mothers. We were the first generation to really be widespread raised by single mothers. A lot of those older cats didn't catch how dramatic the shift was. So they're referencing a logic that may have made sense 20, 30 years earlier, but it didn't make sense for our reality, and they didn't understand how much the reality shifted. And that happened across the board in so many different ways. It looks like we lost them. But so I just want to be mindful of that. A lot of the and understand something, especially as brothers, the same shit is happening now. The things that are occurring where older men are seeing things from a certain vantage point, it's happening and changing so quickly. We don't always understand each other cross generationally. I would argue it's probably not as dramatic because social media is introducing us to what people think on a more regular basis than the 1980s, but there's still going to be that shift. So just be mindful. It may not have been that those older men were advocating for your mothers simply because, but that they didn't get how dramatic the generational shift in experience was coming up in single parent households. But just a thought. Let's bring in Men of Dean. Men of Dean, can you hear us?
Yes.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you, brothers?
I'm good. I want that hat, but we'll put that aside for the moment. Give your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's beautiful to hear this discussion. I mean, it's profound. It's really profound, and it's wise. It's wise just to be having this conversation. I don't know who else is tuned in, but the 2 generations after need to sit down and just take it in. I mean, we're kind of an echo chamber, right? But it's these young cats that really need to take this in. Just a bit of background about myself. I'm a first generation American, so I'm the son of a Trinidadian father and a Panamanian mother. I grew up in a male dominated household. That being said, feminism played its part, because my parents stayed here, and once you're in the Kool-Aid, you're in the Kool-Aid. And it had some very devastating effects upon the family dynamic. being that, so now you've got a very different dynamic between, there's six of us children, and the younger ones are very different than the older ones. And the reason is because of that shift that happened in the family dynamic due to the culture of this country seeping into the household. So that's one aspect and one angle that I'm coming from. And the other angle is that I left the United States in 2000, and my plane departed on September 11th, 2011.
Okay.
And so I left, and then I came back in 2013. So I was gone for about 12 years, and I didn't recognize this country when I came back. I had been back throughout those 12 years, for Christmas vacation and whatnot to visit my family, but I didn't really, I was just in the house. I didn't really see the society until I came back, and it was just amazing, the transformation. It's kind of like if you catch a kid at 1 and then leave and then come back, 12, 13 years later, and you're like, wow, that's how drastic the change has been in this country. But I think most people, to your point, a lot of people don't see it because it's so incremental and gradual. And the other thing that hit me is that I missed the entire Obama administration, and that's when this transformation took place.
Right.
That's when it all took place. I mean, I didn't really put everything together until I came back. I had a cell phone, then I ditched my cell phone. And when I ditched my cell phone about 5 years ago, I started to look up and see, and I was like, wait a second. So I missed Obama. And that is what radicalized or radically changed this country.
Yeah, the Dear Colleague letter in 2011, which really changed the way kids were taught, especially on campus and in high school, where the Me Too era actually started. So,
right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I have a lot more to say, but I just wanted to add those two pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, man. Thank you. And I hope to see you back up again, man.
Yeah. I caught you we connected on LinkedIn, and that's where I was hearing, but I didn't know that you were even on YouTube until I saw people call in. I was like, wait a second, maybe this brother's not on LinkedIn. And then I checked on YouTube and I saw that you guys are over here.
Yeah, I'm working on expanding. I'm trying to get it out there because I think these discussions need to happen, and we need to get out of these, overly sanitized, politically correct discussions, especially as it relates to Black men, and get to the real of what we're experiencing, whether it makes people uncomfortable or not. We need to get to that.
Well, we're talking about Black men, but to be honest with you, what's happening, is happening on a global scale, because I spent 12 years in Asia, and a lot of my first wife was Japanese, and a lot of what I see happening here is mirrored in what is supposed to be a male-dominated society. And this is the context in which you see the Japanese population heading towards zero. And what we're talking about is the crux of it. Because they're supposed to be extinct within the next millennial, or not millennial, the next 100 years. They're gone.
Next century. Okay.
Right. The crux of the century, right? That's the word. But the crux of it is this dynamic, and it's very real.
Right.
And it's being brought in, pummeled in by the West right after the war. But it's deep, but it's not just American Blacks. It's going global.
It's right. It's not to say it's just American Blacks. What it is to say is that, Black men need to be able to dialogue with each other about it, and we need to have the vocabulary. See, I came up, in undergrad and graduate school learning a very particular feminist vocabulary, and I was told that this somehow would encompass everybody. And what I found was there were so many experiences that even I had, let alone other brothers I knew, that could not be clearly articulated within this limited vocabulary. But when I got to the core of it, that vocabulary wasn't designed for us. It was designed for white women, really. And Black women would build off of that and create their own. That's where you get intersectionality. But even that didn't speak to Black men. So even though I do think there are overarching elements that connect men all over the world in terms of where some of this is going, it's still something that, each group of men has to put within the historical context of their own experience as well, to make sense of how it come about. Because like the last caller was talking about, we're talking about households. We're talking about growing up under this. We're talking about listening to mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunties, listening to older men telling you where you're supposed to fit in this. There has to be a discussion on multiple levels where we can actually make sense of this, because it is global, but when it's happening in your house, you still gotta have a language for it.
It's funny because you mentioned this idea of men telling children, hey, that's your mother. So I did that with my children when they were small, when I was married to their mom, and it's just God that that spoke to me and told me, wait a second, because for a while, like you try to protect mom, right? You try to protect the image of mom, the idea of mom, regardless of what mom is doing, while you're trying to work on the relationship and the marriage.
Right.
But when it hit me that, wait a second, that while I was justifying the behavior, by trying to explain it away, that I was doing damage to my sons in their understanding of what love is and what love does.
Right.
Because if I'm telling my kids, well, listen, she's just angry and that's why she called you an idiot, and this is why she called you a cockroach. Well, then what I'm saying is that this is what love, this is a manifestation of love. And that's going to embed into their subconscious. When they, 20 years later, when they'll feel that same thing from a woman, they'll think that that's love as well.
Yes,
and then I was like, okay, I can't have that conversation. I can't justify it anymore. And so now that we're divorced, but I'm still walking, but it's a very, very thin line to tread, because I don't want to instill hatred towards their mother in them, not for sake of me liking or loving their mom anymore, but for their own personal to preserve their sense of self-love. So I can't instill hatred towards her, but at the same time, I have to be a speaker of truth.
Absolutely.
And so it's a really tentative conversation, but I make sure that I speak the truth, but I tell them, I'm telling you this because I have to tell you the truth, not because I'm trying to ingrain hatred towards your mother, but it's hard to figure out when you're in it. It's very, very hard. If not for the sake of God, I really don't know how I figured this out.
Well, I appreciate you coming up, man. Thanks a lot, brother.
Good to talk to you. All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. I got to say, I went through that in the classroom, where I was teaching feminist ideas when I first became a professor. And I noticed I was having the same impact on my male students that he was talking about with his sons. And that pushed me out to want to study more, to find out what other ideas were out there. So this can happen in the home. It can happen in school. There's a lot of different environments it can happen, but it's necessary that we deconstruct this as Black men. Okay, let's welcome Deacon Hicks. Deacon, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. How you doing, man?
Okay. All right, Dr. D. Hasan Johnson. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast, and to the esteemed gentlemen, BGS and Sarah.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make it quickly because I'm about to get off of work. I've been waiting online for this guy to come through and to relieve me. But I'm here right now. What I wanted to say is that I've been a deacon for many years at a particular church, and the gynarchy of the church has become so feminine that it's an embarrassment. Now, here's the catch. I married the pastor's wife.
Ooh. Ooh.
And yeah, I did. And I've been married to her for over 10 years now. We're about to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And even though I had issues with her, I realized that there are times I have to challenge her thought, which is the manipulation and the control of the church. Because there was a pastor that we were following under, and just to say to follow the least, he was good. But the new pastor came in after the retirement of that pastor. He went a whole different way and started to lead the church in a gynarchic way of thinking, a feminine way of thinking. And I approached him with that. And the problem was, and it's the control and the manipulation of the women in the church that at that moment that I say, I can't do this anymore. Because if it's one side and it ain't both sides, then I'm not dealing with this. And when approaching my wife about it, she was like on board with them before she was on board with me. And I questioned my marriage at that time, which is something that I for someone to be married so many years, I didn't want to lose out on my marriage over church issues. So, but to your questions to your gentleman, I mean, for a brother like me, I'm a 55-year-old brother who's seen everything, and everything that you talked on your panel about, I truly understand, especially when it comes to the feminist movement and how toxic some of it is. Now, all feminist movements are toxic, but the majority of it is. And I've like many, even in my own family, I was approached with the delusional part of it. So, but to the degree of it, I just want to say thank you, gentlemen. Dr. T. Hasan Johnson, I want to thank you. I discovered you like a year ago, but I was on Safe House. I don't know if you ever heard it on Facebook, but there was a brother that introduced me to you on that particular group. And I fell in love with you and everything else, especially about marriage, about your marriage. So I can relate to it. So, but anything else other than that, God bless you guys. And thank you for inviting me to your post.
Hey, man, thanks for coming up. Man, appreciate that. All right. Wow. Pastor's wife.
Everybody said, uh-oh.
All right. So we got Kayron. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Kayron, can you hear us?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead and chime in on this.
I won't take long. PC, Johnson, BGS, and Sarah. Yeah, the deacon that just got off, I find what he said funny. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was raised Gillagheechee, right? And speaking of like the witchcraft and things like that happened, right? The growing up, and I was also raised probably in Eastern North Carolina too, right? So I was raised heavily in the church and a lot heavily with old spiritualism and hoodoo, right? And it wasn't uncommon on a regular basis to be told that if you don't do XYZ, XYZ will happen to you. Or you're not a good man of rapport or a man of character until you ascribe to my spiritual belief. You come to my ministry, my church. You come to my family's belief system. And what happens is regardless of whatever you did, you were not a good man of rapport to that woman or her family until you yielded their spiritual belief, either became a part of their church family or became a part of their family culture in their unique way, right? And in that way, it was a culture or church family that the women controlled, the women manipulated, the women guided. So you really had to castrate yourself to be part of that family, to be part of that unit, to be with those women, because you wanted that woman so bad because you're taught, well, you're not the best man you can be unless you have a good woman at your side, right? You're not taught, hey, self-validate as a man and become your greatest of your own. The woman will come in time, but when she does, she'll be in your program. That's not taught. And truth be told, in the South, that's really blasphemy, because a lot of people don't teach their boys that you are self-sufficient and self-validate. So you can avoid a lot of pitfalls in life by being that way and knowing that. But in the Black culture, it's not really taught. And I can speak specifically on the South because I was raised and went through the South many times. As a matter of fact, I was a minister for a number of years. And going to different ministries, I was able to see things like the, gynarchy at work. And that's why I'm so thankful to the work you do, Dr. Johnson, and him and brother, Dr. Tommy Curry, because like you said, that vocabulary is crucial to be able to break down what we see, because everything that, you all have talked about, I've experienced and seen it, but I didn't have the vocabulary to really put it in the proper context.
Right.
But I've seen it my entire life how women will use spirituality, they'll use church, they'll use many different things to gain that power over you in some form or fashion and make you feel less than by exercising that power. And I saw it in all forms and facets. But the first lesson I learned it from was an old pimp in my neighborhood who sat there and told me, a woman to avoid accountability will use everything. Not all women. Now I was saying that all women are evil by nature, anything like that, but saying a woman who has no discipline will use anything to avoid accountability. She'll use you, she'll use God, she'll use her husband. Whatever she got to do, she'll use it to avoid accountability. Just because she in a church don't mean she ain't a bomb sitting in there and blow the whole place up. Because I've seen it too. Women will sit there and weave their whole fingers throughout the entire ministry. And then when they get tired of it, they'll pull the string, blow it all up. Because she done slept with this person's husband, that person's husband, turn this woman out, that woman out, turn children against one another. So yeah, I've seen it. But I appreciate you letting me come on, Doc. I appreciate everyone on the panel, and I appreciate the work you all do.
Hey, brother Cam, before you go, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Since you have both perspectives of being in the Gullah Geechee culture and being in the church, I wanted to ask: is in the Christian church typically, I guess maybe until recent times, you would have a male pastor, but it's been my perception. And I want to hear from you that it was actually the women who, even despite the fact that the figurehead is a pastor, that it's the women who are actually running everything. Is that
absolutely correct? Because by that tithe money, because they understand men who are men have a problem with submitting to a man telling them they're wrong. What are they going to do? You ain't going to tell me as a black man I go out every day and work hard and deal with a white man calling me out my name, then come and tell me on Sunday I'm not a good enough man. So a lot of brothers would avoid being in church on Sunday. And as a result, the way that the pastor makes their money is to placate to the women. And, look, we have to keep the women pacified so they continue to give tithes, give offering, and come run operations and things in the ministry, because the men ain't going to do it, because a man's not going to take another man using religion to insult him once he's had a mental awakening.
Yeah, I was going to say, you and the last caller both walked into, Covens, really. I mean, yes. I would say it in a more academic language. I would say you walked into the gynopatestal family structure, but in a vernacular language, I would say, yeah, you walked into a coven. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this broadcast. And I asked Sarah and BGS, to come up and talk about this with me, because there's not a lot of direction that many of us have when you walk into a situation like that. And you have these kind of things that are being done to you, and you don't really understand what they are, because they're not often in your face. They're very subtle, very manipulative, very passive aggressive sometimes. And you're like, what the hell is this? And if you stay in it long enough, you look up one day and you're like, how the hell did I end up doing this mess?
They're not always dressed like Erykah Badu. Okay. They don't have beads and do crystals and have tarot cards. Okay.
It reminds me of Ghostbusters when they found this Missoula, and she came up. It's at the form of a woman, and had the dogs came up, right? And the dogs were servants. That's what they kind of really reduce you to, because and the role they want you to play. They want to be God. They're gonna be Zool, and you're gonna serve. That's what you're gonna do. Because I've seen women in ministries literally be madams in the church. They'll say, you know what? I see this brother come in. Let me go ahead and match him up with these women here. And I've seen it. It's wild.
So K-Ron is so who's more powerful, the deacons or the mothers of the church?
Oh, the mothers all day. The deacons can say what they want to say, but what happens is those women will. If you want to see intimacy weaponized against a man, look at the church. It is heavily weaponized against men, and they treat like doggy treats. If you jump and do what I tell you to, you'll get it. But if not, you won't. Or better yet, they're the keeper of their men's secrets. Perfect example. You have a lot of homophobia that's in the church, but also you have a lot of brothers who want to down low. It ain't widespread, but it's in enough places. And they'll find out their husband's desires, they'll find out his proclivities, and what they'll say is, do as I say, or I'll expose you and destroy your entire reputation. And that happens often as well.
And I would argue in feminist circles, the relationship between male feminists and female feminists isn't entirely different from that. I just put that out there.
Scooby snacks, huh?
Oh yeah. I have almost hundreds of stories of wild things that I've seen. I've almost got caught up in myself, but being blessed to dodge certain bullets.
Right.
And Brother K-Ron, it's ironic that the wisest words that you quoted came from that of a pimp.
Yes.
Real
very
talk.
true. Very true. Well, because it was I'm still a young man. I'm blessed. I was born in '87, but I had a lot of life experience because I had to learn the hard way very quickly. But he was a pimp who was a neighborhood wino at the same time. And he was like, listen, some of the best lessons you will get in life come from the people you never expect. And it was a wino walk around the neighborhood, and I would always sit around the game because my granddaddy told me, hey, you know what he's talking about, because I grew up in the part of East North Carolina after we moved to South Carolina around there where Frank Lucas, was. So, people think that the boonies of the country don't got no wisdom, but a lot of the game, them old men have it or had it, they just never told it. It was kind of taboo to tell young men, I can't tell you game because my wife would be mad at me. Because then my wife can't run game on you. Or son, I don't want to tell you the game because then you're gonna buck up and tell the truth. And I gotta deal with my wife now. When you
right. So in essence, the wino was the freest man in the space, wasn't
he? Absolutely was. Absolutely he was.
Yeah.
He had nothing to lose.
That's right. There is only Zoo.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Hey man, I appreciate you coming up, man.
All right. Y'all brothers be blessed.
You too.
All right, bro.
Anything now we still got a couple more I'm gonna bring in, but anything you guys want to say before I bring in the next person?
Yeah, like I was just saying that at the very beginning, man. There isn't a difference. We actually try to say that the church is different from other spiritualities. No, it's not. It's the same. Same.
Right.
The methods might be different, but it's the same. Right. And they get the one. The difference is they actually indoctrinate the little boys at a very early age into this system. Whether within the other systems, you have to be a little bit older, but they actually indoctrinate the little boys at a very early age in the Christian church to actually serve the women like that. So,
and that's a very powerful thing, you know. And actually, even though I was aware of it, I underestimated the power that represents, because as we all know, still the majority of our people come up in the Christian church. Okay, and so on top of the conditioning that exists in the family, where we're subject to often a female dominated household, you're going into a cultural structure that's built into the fabric of Black society that is programming people into that level of consciousness under the guise of the church, you know. And that's very powerful. That's a very powerful effect on people's psyche.
Yeah, absolutely.
Never underestimate the power of the little mint that the church mother gives you on Sunday. Okay.
Yeah. The pat on the head, kind of.
The pat on the head and a little mint. There, baby.
All right, we got JoJo. JoJo, can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go
Hi.
ahead and give us your thoughts on this.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say good evening to everyone. I've really been enjoying the discussion. And I would say my perspective comes from when dealing with what you're talking about, like Black Mother Goddess worship, spirituality and things like that. It didn't happen in my household. So that's not my perspective on it. It's dealing with people outside of my household and outside of my family dynamics, because I didn't see this growing up. My family definitely has a patriarchy. I have no issue with that. And it's passed down generationally. And I am, originally from the United States. Generations, we have a strong culture in our family. So when dealing with people outside of that, this is when I met up with the feminism, especially the Black feminism, Black men being thoroughly emasculated by their women. So I didn't see that. And the dynamic of dealing with that through relationships and friendships, I noticed that it was a problem when dealing with people outside of my household because of me coming from a more orderly household. And that is even in spite of the fact that, yes, I've been exposed to Christianity throughout the Black community, but my family actually read the Bible versus being taught people's rhetoric. So that was also an issue, because what you'll find is that most Black people do not read the Bible, or they only take verses. They don't actually know, because if Black women read the Bible, and this is what I even learned in the church as a younger girl, is that if Black women were really into the Bible, they would know that none of them are living next to the Bible, because the Bible has a very specified way for how women should conduct themselves. Not to say it doesn't for men. So when you actually follow that, and these women who believe that they're Proverbs 31 women, none of them are living next to that. Probably, like, if anything, maybe 0.5% of the Black community's population, at least in the United States. So when you're looking at that and you see that today versus like the time you said, the big, huge transition that the Black community had, where we went from having the highest rates of marriage in the United States, which is so difficult for Black people to believe. And you're talking about in the early 1960s to now, you're having the highest rates of single motherhood. You're looking at a community that has even transitioned how they even show up. They're no longer not having the kids as 16 as single mothers. You're seeing women who are in their 30s, mid 30s, and early 40s being single mothers and being very proud to be. And it's very interesting to see that, because if you went to college at HBCU, you see that transition in their brains, that it's not even the whole freezing of the eggs things. Black women have been so indoctrinated with hurting their community by hating their men. They don't see that the feminism they practice and the misandry that they're practicing is nothing like what white women are practicing. White women protect their community by being feminists, because it's another outreach of them holding on to their supremacy as a group. Notice how I didn't say white supremacy, because unlike every other group on the planet that practices supremacy, which every group does, because every group of people is supposed to be tribalistic, Black people in the United States, and the people who even come to the United States who so-called want to be African American and Black at the time, they don't even want to practice tribalism like they would have in their countries. So it doesn't make any sense. These other groups of people understand that regardless of my issue with my men, this is still not inclusive. Black women want to be inclusive to their gender, to their sexuality, and to their quote unquote race. And it's unlike any other group of people in the world.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you say you came into contact with feminism, was it college? Where were you when that happened?
A big part of that would have been school, church, and then also, and when I'm saying school, I'm talking about, primaries and things like that before college.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when dealing with that, I noticed when I was in school, and you're with your friends and you're discussing your futures and things like that, I was ridiculed for saying my mother taught me to go to college to get a man. But when I was in like primary school, middle school, high school, the white women I knew, the Asian women I knew, the girls at the time, when I would go to their homes and listen to their families, because my father always taught me children to be seen and not heard. And people think that that is a rude thing. What I learned so much from not talking, like so many of our sisters do, and just listening, helped me grow as a human being. So when I would be at their homes, I wasn't there to call them any names and tell them what I thought. I just listened. Their mothers told them the same exact thing. Go to college and get a husband. But when I went to school, and there was a huge portion of Black women who were taught to go to college to be better than their men, to get all these independent types of situations, this is weird, because to me that was an odd thing to hear. So I realized that I can't talk to quote unquote Black people, because I realized that I don't have the same nature as they do. And I can't talk about these things because I wasn't taught to worship women. And my father was never taught that a woman is smarter than him. The men in my family categorically did what men have always done historically, which is they're the builders, they're the movers, and they give out the orders, and you deal out what they gave you. But in the Black community, that's not what we see here. And that's why we have such a horrible structure of things, because we lack the structure and discipline that's needed to grow a community. So when you're looking at this type of thing and you're seeing that, I might have some 40-year-old Black friends or associates, if you will, and you're talking to them about men, and they'll be like, oh, okay, this is mid-40s Black women who are single mothers saying, oh, what's his astrological sign? What's his moon sign? You're like, my God, you're 44 and you're asking me about a man's astro sign. I mean, it's categorically ridiculous. You're like, wait, how is this a conversation? You don't want to know what he does? And the next question they're asking, well, how tall is he? Because I'm 5'6" and I can't deal with a man. This is like, well, ma'am, I mean, we live in the United States where I'm getting that the cost of living in certain places affords you the ability to take care of yourself and possibly your children. But is that the life you want to live, is subject to the point that you can just barely afford something? Or would you rather understand that there was something to growing up in structures of people who, don't get me wrong, there were housewives in our family, but a lot of women still worked. And a lot of Black people like completely misstep in history, that a lot of our men went off to war and came back with children. And those men still took care of those children. So while we want to sit here and talk about how we got the the Rolling Stone granddaddy. What about your Rolling Stone grandfather that grandmothers that your grandfather stood beside? He knew that child wasn't his. But there was something about keeping a structure to family that you understood what happened. He knew he went off the war and it's a possibility that he could have died. But we completely missed up that there was about 3 or 4 wars from the 1900s only. And it's like, we just was like, oh, that was his baby. She just had him for 10 months longer than normal. Like, come on. We have one of the most insane histories of a group of people of what we accept. And I love how when I'm talking to anybody, especially Black women that are under 27, they always want to give you this history of like, who did you learn this from? Because you only know Black women in your family, right? Like everybody in their families are Black women. Like there's never a man. There's always and I got a little brother named Tommy that I hate because my mama gave him more attention. But they don't understand your mother disabled, not coddled, but she disabled this man. Because you're talking about, I'm hearing the guys come up and talking about the people in the South. I live in the South. And I saw this, but I especially saw it in poorer households. Middle income to higher, we act like there's no classism, but middle income to higher, I didn't see it as much. So in the poorer or lower income families, yes, I saw this. The Black men were emasculated to the bone marrow, and they were taught to be disabled in so many ways. And they were taught that if you weren't like your sisters and got into education, like you guys were talking about earlier, and they didn't teach them to have hands-on skills. The men that I know who in my same class or higher, they were taught to have skills in different ways, not just to go to college, because why would you want to exclude someone's future by saying, well, you need to have a degree because I have a degree. You need to make 45,000 because I make 45,000. You need to have a home because I have a home. Only in the Black community do we create bills and we create obstructions and obstacles to having a better future. And I just wanted to give my thought on that because it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's like, okay, if they call me not Black, I'm okay because I don't believe in the term anyway. And I'm like, we're the only group of people who doesn't practice tribalism a la racism in the United States. I think it's the funniest thing that they're the only ones trying to be inclusive while everybody else is being exclusive. We'll talk about voting, but Asians barely vote. We'll talk about these things and say, well, we need help. Why? No one else is asking for this. Why don't you want to be exclusive with your resources, exclusive with your talent, exclusive to these things, so that way you can you can take from the inward and build out. And I would just say that one of the last things I want to say is that we are not practicing culture the way that culture is set. One of the biggest tenets of success is the way that you practice culture, family, and community. And those are interchangeable in family and community. And we're not doing that when we're always set upon and put upon with this, there needs to be this gender war situation where the other side has had from the 70s on to 2022 to be at the head of this gender war, but the community hasn't grown from it. So at this point, I would really love Black men to stop giving penis access to these women. When you see that their behavior is not what you expect it to be, and you're taking disrespect, like the things that I've heard out of women's mouths to Black men, I'm trying to figure out, like in my household, the thought process of saying something to a Black man like that, or just any man, is insane.
That's training. That's training.
Right?
That is actually training. That's training.
Correct, but the way that Black women act, I would be scared for my life to act like that to men who I'm calling the biggest predators, using the R word, abusers. But you don't seem to be scared because you're always willing to fight them. And I can't believe Black women, especially because I'm not talking about the other groups right now, but I can't believe Black women talking about their men doing things when you guys seem to be the most violent, because you don't seem afraid of the men that you're calling the most violent. You don't seem afraid to be the men you're calling the biggest abusers when you're always fighting them. You're always wanting to key their cars, punch their tires, hurt their children, drown their kids, take their kids away from them. White men show that they are willing to put a Scott Peterson out here and kill a few women to keep their women in check. But Black men are not that strong. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that it should be like that. I'm suggesting that white women still have more fear of their men than Black women do. But Black women are the most racist. They are the most subject to wanting to give out classism. Even when a Black woman is working at the drive-thru at Burger King, she will talk crap about a Black man who is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and say that she's better than him. And our Black men are like, well, you know, my mama is Black. You're like, oh my goodness. Of course. And her father is Black, because these other groups of men, other than, you know, putting their semen on top of your mom's face, he didn't want her as a wife. So of course your father's Black too. So I just wanted to say that, because I wish our men, like, stop giving access to them. When you see the behavior is not up to par, let them rot and let them cry about it.
Yes, YSBM, baby.
That is disrespectful. And until we get back a community with more shame and stop allowing the disrespect, we will not be able to move in forward at all.
That's true.
Facts. Amen.
Hey, Doc, clip that, okay? You want about your TikTok? Clip it.
All I can say is amen to that, sister.
We appreciate that, JoJo. Thanks for coming up.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, because I'm sure somebody's gonna hate my guts, and I'm absolutely fine with
not
it.
Here. Not here. You got a lot of hand claps and amens in the chat. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, I will clip it. Appreciate it, JoJo.
Have a great night.
You too.
Doc is speechless. Wait a minute, Dr. Johnson speechless? I don't believe it. With a belly laugh on top of it?
She was getting it. He was getting it. I couldn't say that. I saw him break. He broke. He was cool for a while, then he broke.
He broke, yeah. Yeah, Doc, he almost fell out of the chair.
That was, but she's basically said everything that we've been saying or couldn't say. And what was particularly poignant about it was that, she came unfiltered, with it. And there was no diplomacy that she had to deal with. When we have to talk about it, we have to be somewhat diplomatic, because, we don't want to say things to offend, and she just came straight and just said everything that we wanted to say but couldn't say.
See, Reynolds is feeling me. I was laughing. I just couldn't. But we got one more. We're gonna make it real quick. Gavin, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, sir. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. This is the last call of the night. So briefly, give us your comments on this.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Sarah. Nice to talk to you, meet you, sir. And Master BGS, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. But by the way, Sarah, please put your channel in the chat, if you want people to come subscribe to you. Okay.
All right.
I do believe you got a wrench. So put the link to your channel in the chat. We got 600 people watching. So this is a good time to pick up subscribers. So please follow Sarah on his channel. Very wise. I've known him for a long time. Spirituality, very wise. Actually a masculine, very masculine man. So esoteric. He's been a Gnostic probably longer than I have. So very good person to actually follow. So please.
But also, and also does individual therapy. So you might want to keep in touch with him along those lines. Yes. But Gavin, go ahead and give us your thoughts, man.
Okay, so I joined because I see it's been going on for over 2 hours, and I joined, I'd say, in the last 30 minutes. So, but in regards to the overarching talking about spirituality and what's been going on lately in our community and on a broader nature, a broader spectrum. At one point, Professor, you did mention how it's kind of subtle in ways it's been also shown to the American community, and I'm thinking also through the media, specifically the new Doctor Strange movie, where there's a lot of witchcraft theme in it. And I saw the movie, and not only did it infuse witchcraft, but also feminism as to way like it's overarching to the point whereby it's used to destroy the masculine. And that was my take on it, and that's where I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that contribution. Thanks a lot, Gavin.
You're welcome.
All right. I'm still a little thrown, but anyway.
And well, that's rare. So clip it. Anybody clip that? You know, we'll very see Dr. Johnson break character, and Sarah almost never. Okay.
Well, look, man, I'm gonna give y'all the floor. Any closing thoughts? We'll go ahead and
yeah. After JoJo, really, there's nothing to say. She stripped all the meat off the bones. Okay.
Anything you want to say as we close out, Brother Sarah?
Brother, like Brother BGS said, you know, the sister said everything that needed to be said. She was a perfect person to close out on. She just took the whole gamut of everything. So there's nothing really to add to that.
He started talking about men coming home from war, and I fell out laughing.
And having you know what? And there's a baby there, and black men had actually took a, hey, it's not mine biologically, but guess what? I'm gonna take up the mantle. I'm gonna do my duty and help raise this child. And black men have always been that way.
Had a 10-month pregnancy.
Had a 10-month pregnancy. You know,
goddamn well that light-skinned baby with freckles ain't yours.
The redhead stepchild. Whereas a white man coming back from the war had seen that, he would have killed his wife and that baby.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
But black men are black. I keep telling black women, you have the best man on the planet, and you don't even know it.
Oh man! Shout out to Leon. Shout out to Greg. If I didn't shout your super chat out, I usually put it on the screen. If I missed you, I apologize.
Yeah.
I
put Sarah's channel link into the chat. So please hit the link. Do us and Dr. Johnson a favor. Hit the link and go subscribe. Okay. Get his numbers up.
Well, and if you haven't subscribed to that guy at BGS IBMOR, crazy as he is, go ahead and subscribe over there as well. And we're gonna wait till JoJo get a channel. We're gonna start shouting how.
Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, anyway. I can feel the hate going her way already. Okay. The women are gonna hate her.
Yeah, my goodness. Well, but I appreciate both of y'all for coming up. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you for listening, brother. It was a pleasure to be on with you, Brother BGS.
All right, man.
Don't be a stranger.
All right. I'm pull both of you down, but thanks a lot, man.
All right.
Okay. So, we went all over the place, all around the mulberry bush, as they say, but the major point that I want to emphasize is there's a lot of different ways that women can weaponize culture. They can weaponize an environment. They can weaponize religion or spirituality and use it in a very manipulative manner. And we just want to be aware of how that can happen, because I've had so many men reach out to me in the last couple of years talking about these things and what they're experiencing, but having no outlet for it, having no one to discuss it with, having no framework to understand any of the overarching patterns. And I wanted to just kind of lay a few things out. I'm not at all suggesting that tonight is exhaustive on the topic, but I at least wanted to start a conversation or continue it, because we started one over a year and a half ago, I think, looking at the mother goddess principle and the manipulative tactics that can play out. That started with what's the name, Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. But we just kind of wanted to put that in a framework where maybe if you're dealing with this in your own life, you can actually identify it for what it is, call it out, and address how to handle it, whether it's to challenge it or to start making a strategy to leave, but not putting up with it, not allowing yourself to be manipulated in it, and waking up one morning and finding yourself in an existence that you cannot stand. So for the most part, I look forward to your comments as usual. Use this as an opportunity to share information about how men can strategize and deal with it, or how they can interpret it and tell us some of the things that may have happened with you. All right. So other than that, I hope you all have a good night. See you soon. Peace.